The Grier, Wolf, Weirdest from YouTube. Hello. So, 2 weeks ago, I carefully read through Genesis 1 and made a literal old Earth interpretation of it. If you want to watch that, you can. I'll probably have some sort of annotation on the screen for you to click on it and go there. Last week, I did not upload a video. Well, I uploaded a video to my other channel, but I did not upload a video to this channel, even though this was supposed to be a once-a-week thing. Because I like procrastinating. And so I kind of procrastinated myself into a major pickle. So if I can manage it this week, I will try to do 2 videos here. If I can't, then some other week maybe. But this video is covering Genesis 2 now. And the thing I want to talk about with Genesis 2 is going to be confronting a standard anti-Christianity argument that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 have separate accounts about the creation of the world, and they don't match up. And I am going to show that they do. You just have to look hard enough and pay close enough attention. So, first, let us establish the order of things being made according to Genesis 1. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And in the last video, I talked about how you can either interpret this as the first event in all of the events described in this chapter, or just the summary of the chapter, or somehow both. I mean, it does work as both, so you could say that it is intended to be both. But that will not be important, at least in my mind, for the argument I'm going to be making today. So, starting on verse 3, we have the first day happen, and God makes light, and before there's just darkness, and so he made light, and then separated the light from the darkness, and called the light day and the darkness night. Then we have day 2. He takes the waters that are on the earth and separates them so that there's water below the sky and water above the sky, i.e. oceans and clouds. And then day 3, he takes the water under the sky and groups it into a certain region of the world, and then where it's not anymore, there is now dry land. Then he also, on the 3rd day, makes plants. 4th day, makes sun, moon, stars. 5th day, he makes fish and other things that live in the water, along with birds. And then finally, 6th day, makes land animals of all of the various sorts, and then he makes humans. And then it says, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. Now, on to chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Okay. From my understanding, the chapter markers are kind of arbitrary and have been added in later. And so I kind of question why exactly the chapter break was here instead of at the end of describing the seventh day, but oh well. That's just kind of a simple intro to the next story. And so I will read through the whole next portion of chapter 2, and then I will discuss the things that I think should be discussed for the argument that I'm going to be making. So, verse 4. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. But streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into the nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there it was separated into 4 headwaters. The name of the first is the Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It runs along the east side of Ashur. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. The Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will certainly die." The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. Whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs, and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of the man." That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. And that is the end of that chapter. So, the order of events, as described in chapter 2. First with verse 5. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up from it, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. That is the starting time for this narrative, and this version of the story would then be corresponding with its starting position halfway through day 3 in the Genesis 1 account. because day 3 is 2 parts, taking the water and moving it to one spot so there can be earth in the other spot and dry ground in the other spot, and then making plants. And we know it's before making plants, but we also have strong suggestion that there is in fact dry ground. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense for it to say that there was no one to work the ground and stuff. So there's probably ground at this point. So it's probably just before he made plants. Verse 6. But streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. So now we have an event that happens after that thing happening, or the starting state, and that thing that happens is the ground gets watered. Then verse 7, then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. So from that paragraph we have there were no plants, but there was ground. Then the ground got watered. Then God made man. Now, in verse 8, after that, it talks about how the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden. So this is now before, at some point in the past, from the creation of man. And so it could be that it is still after the watering of the ground and when the initial state of there not being any plants and the ground not having been watered by rain yet. So we now have the order no plants plus ground, and then some combination of ground gets watered by streams, then plants. Probably in that order. That seems to make the most sense. And then God makes man. And then we have some talk about rivers and God's commands to Adam. And then God deciding that he will make a woman to be a helper suitable for the man. And then it talks about how the Lord God had formed out of the ground all of the wild animals and all the birds of the sky. So, some point before man was made, animals were made. And so, one of those possible orderings, because it technically doesn't say when, would be just before man gets made, which would fit with the Genesis 1 account. And then God has Adam name all the creatures, and then knocks Adam out and takes one of his ribs and makes Eve. And so, one of the possible chronologies, taking just this one chapter, is initial condition, earth and dry ground, but no plants. Then the ground gets watered. Then plants happen. Then animals happen. And then man gets made. Which fits with the Genesis 1 account. Now, yes, there was 3 days in between the dry ground getting formed and plants happening, and before man was made according to the Genesis 1 account. But we're also talking about God here. it's not like 3 days matters on his time scale. And he told us what happened in the first chapter, and this is just supposed to be specifics, so it doesn't really matter if he leaves some things out and telling us when this event is happening. So yes, using the most obvious way of constructing chronology, if you aren't taking a look at the Genesis 1 account, you can come up with chronologies that do not fit the Genesis 1 account. But it is also possible to use Genesis 2 and construct a chronology that does fit the Genesis 1 account. So the two are not in conflict like people say they are. You just have to look closely and be wanting to fit Genesis 2 with Genesis 1, as opposed to wanting Genesis 2 to not fit with Genesis 1. Because let's be honest, we're all humans. We're all very biased. That's just a fact of life. I am biased towards getting the Bible to agree with itself. Someone who is biased towards getting the Bible to disagree with itself will likely find many ways in which the Bible disagrees with itself, and I will find ways in which those the idea that it does interfere with its or disagree with itself is false. I will find different interpretations of the same words to fit my personal beliefs. That is a fact. But another fact is the fact that both can be constructed. You can construct a chronology of Genesis 2 to agree or disagree with Genesis 1. So you can't use that to actually disprove the Bible's reliability. You have to use, if you wanted to do that, you would have to use something else. And yes, there are lots of science, modern science, that has come up with good theories that seem to work in the natural world as we observe it, whether directly or less directly, that do not agree with the simplest interpretations of the Bible. But that doesn't mean that the Bible is false. It means that we have to take a look at the Bible again and see what it's actually saying, and see if it can fit the data. It's not science, but it's not anti-science. The idea that science and religion are at war with one another and are diametrically opposed is ridiculous. That is one of the reasons why I am doing this series. Because I do not believe that half the conflicts, I believe that at least half of the conflicts people say that exist between the Bible and science can be resolved if you want to resolve them. And you also know enough science to actually know how to go about resolving them. The problem is, though, that a lot of Christians don't want to resolve them. A lot of Christians want the Bible to have the simplest interpretation that makes sense to them, even though if you look with your eyes hard enough at the world, it doesn't fit the world. And scientists oftentimes don't care about the Bible. I care about both. And so I'm trying to fit them together. And that is all. Thank you for watching. Please excuse the random philosophical rant at the end that you might not have watched to the end till. But then again, if you didn't watch to the end, you wouldn't be watching this. So, until we meet again, farewell.